Have you experienced being made fun of or being bullied? Louis Zamperini and his family could not speak English, and that's why he was bullied as a child. During difficult times, he encouraged himself with the words his brother had spoken to him. If I can take it, I can make it. This built up his inner courage and enabled him to become a winning Olympic runner and to survive the torture and abuse by the Japanese during his captivity without compromising the truth. Now he stands out in history as an honorable man who overcame difficulty and has faith in God. As mentioned last week, courage is the inner strength or resilience to continue to do the right thing. God commands us to be courageous, but he promises to be with us. Last week, we touched on courage as daring to be different, even when being like everyone else seems like the normal thing to do. Daniel and his friends were able to overcome the cultural pressure around them and stick to God's culture when they were in Babylon. We also talked about how courage is not giving up when trouble comes, but looking for a way to solve the problem and not stopping until you find the solution. Daniel prayed and asked God for the king's dream and interpretation in order to save his life and the life of his friends. Here are other examples of courage from the book of Daniel. First, courage is speaking the truth even when it could cost your life. Two stories in Daniel chapters 4 and 5 illustrate this. When Daniel speaks the truth to powerful kings, even though it was bad news for them, and put him in danger. King Nebuchadnezzar had a second dream. He dreamt of a large tree that gave food and shelter to all, but it was cut down and its stump left behind for 7 seasons. Daniel told him that the tree referred to him, Nebuchadnezzar, that if he would not repent of his pride, God would strip him of everything for 7 years until he acknowledged God. Sure enough, in a moment of his pride, God made him go crazy, and he acted like an animal for 7 years. After that, he acknowledged God, and he was restored to sanity and power. Later, King Belshazzar, Nebuchadnezzar's son, as an insult to God, was using utensils from the Jewish temple in his pagan party when he saw a human hand writing this on the wall: Mene, mene, tekel parsin. Daniel was called to explain it, and he confronted Belshazzar about his actions and pride, despite what God had done to his father Nebuchadnezzar to teach him a lesson. Daniel told Belshazzar that the writing meant God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. You have been weighed in the scales and found wanting. Sure enough, that night, Belshazzar was killed, and Darius the Mede became the new king. But Daniel remained an influential person in the new kingdom. Courage is speaking the truth, even when it could cost your life. What is a truth God is calling you to speak, even if it could mean losing your popularity, or facing rejection, or even facing persecution if you speak it? Secondly, courage is continuing to worship God no matter what. In Daniel 6, we are told about how Daniel had an excellent spirit and distinguished himself above all the high officials. They became envious of him and got King Darius the king to issue a decree that whoever worships anyone other than King Darius would be thrown into the lion's den. They knew that Daniel was a man of integrity, and the only thing they could use against him was his love for God and faithfulness to him. True enough, you'll find that in Daniel 6:10, he violates the new law by continuing to pray to God 3 times a day facing Jerusalem. These men told King Darius of what they saw Daniel do, and although he was a good friend of Darius, the law could not be revoked. Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. King Darius had wanted to rescue Daniel, but he couldn't. So he was sleepless that night, hoping Daniel's God would save him. I'll read what happened next. Then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Then the king was exceedingly glad, and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the lion's den. Ooh. Later, Darius sends out a letter glorifying Daniel's God and telling people to fear and honor him. Daniel again prospers during this new empire of Darius and Cyrus. So, courage is continuing to worship God no matter what. Have you gotten to the point where your faith was challenged by the people or circumstances around you? What did you do about it? Would you violate a law that prevented you from worshiping God? In conclusion, Daniel's resilience and courage was fueled by his faith in God. His spirit of excellence continued no matter what persecution he faced. As a result, he stood out and was rewarded with honor both in the eyes of God and in the eyes of ungodly and powerful kings who had conquered his nation. God can use you no matter where you are. You just have to remain faithful to him and be courageous in the face of a culture that is against God and that can try to strip you of your faith. I don't want to sow fear into your lives, but I also don't want to sugarcoat life. If at any point you struggled in this pandemic, which I'm sure you have, because I have, and a lot of people are, no matter how blessed we are, know that this is just a trial run of the difficulties in life, but God has promised to be with us no matter what. And Jesus has promised that he will return and he will establish a new heaven and a new earth, and he will remove our pain and suffering. So don't give up. Be strong, be courageous, speak the truth, keep worshiping God no matter what, and believe that he will never leave you nor forsake you. Thanks for tuning in today, guys. Let's keep praying for our world and sharing God's love to other people. Have an amazing week.